The massive, gleaming ships of the Galactic Empire loomed above Earth like predators circling their prey. The invasion had been swift, as expected. The Empire, vast and powerful, had long since set its sights on Earth. The resources, the strategic position, and the raw potential of humanity were all too tempting for the Empire to resist. But Earth was not the weak, defenseless planet the Empire had assumed. When they made their move, humanity fought back, fiercely. Earth's military forces, though dwarfed by the vast fleets of the Empire, put up a resistance unlike any other the Empire had ever encountered. But despite their best efforts, the overwhelming might of the Galactic Empire's war machines proved too much. Earth's defenses were crushed, and the Empire took control of Earth's cities, forcing humanity into submission. But amidst the chaos, something, or rather someone, slipped through their grasp. Private Marcus "Ironclad" Callahan was no ordinary soldier. He wasn't just a member of Earth's resistance, he was a Navy SEAL, one of the most elite warriors humanity had ever produced. He had been part of the small but determined group of soldiers who had fought valiantly against the Empire's invasion forces. When the final wave of resistance fell, Marcus had been captured in the streets of New York, a city on the brink of complete destruction. He had been taken as a prisoner, shackled and thrown into the depths of the Empire's flagship, the Tyrant. The Galactic Empire's officials, accustomed to the power and respect they commanded, assumed Marcus was just another soldier, one of many. They saw him as a mere human, weak and vulnerable, easy to control. They didn't realize they were dealing with a man who had survived every type of hell humanity had thrown at him, a man who had trained for years to survive, fight, and kill when necessary. What the Empire failed to see was that Marcus wasn't afraid. They had never encountered anyone like him. Marcus sat in the cold, dimly lit cell aboard the Tyrant. The metal bars of his cage reflected the harsh artificial lights overhead, casting long shadows across the bare walls. His hands were cuffed to a restraint pole, but even in captivity, his posture was calm, confident, and unwavering. The Empire's guards were constantly changing shifts, eyeing him with suspicion. But Marcus didn't flinch. His training had prepared him for this moment, for any situation that could arise. "Human," a voice rang through the intercom. The voice was cold, calculated, and dripping with the superiority that had been the Empire's hallmark for centuries. "You're being transported to the command deck for interrogation. The Grand Admiral has requested your presence." Marcus didn't respond at first. He only looked up at the security camera mounted in the corner of the room. He wasn't intimidated. He had been through far worse than this. His mind was clear, calculating, analyzing the situation with the precision that had made him one of the deadliest soldiers alive. Every guard, every door, every weak point in this ship was mapped in his mind. The door to his cell opened, and two heavily armored alien guards entered. They moved toward him with the arrogance of the Empire, expecting him to be compliant, to obey orders like any other prisoner they had captured before. But Marcus had learned long ago that when the enemy expected you to act one way, it was time to act in a way they couldn't predict. The first guard attempted to unlock his cuffs, but Marcus was faster. In one swift motion, he used the chain of his restraints to hook around the guard's neck, pulling him toward the metal bars with a force that left the guard gasping for air. Before the second guard could react, Marcus swung his leg, knocking him off balance and sending him crashing into the wall. The guard staggered to his feet, only to be met with the brutal efficiency of Marcus's training. A quick strike to the throat and a well-placed knee to the chest sent the guard crumpling to the floor, unconscious. The first guard, now struggling for breath, looked up in disbelief as Marcus loomed over him. "You've made a mistake," Marcus said, his voice low and deadly. "I don't break. I never have." The guard's eyes widened with realization. He was dealing with a soldier who had been forged in the fires of combat, one who had survived the worst of humanity's wars. He wasn't just a prisoner, he was a weapon. Before the second guard could recover, Marcus freed himself from his restraints and stood tall. His military training had kicked in, and every move he made was precise, calculated, and deadly. The guards might have been strong, but they weren't prepared for the relentless will of a Navy SEAL. As the alarms blared across the ship, the sound of clanging boots echoed down the hallways. The guards would come for him. The Empire would send more. But Marcus wasn't going to wait for them to make the first move. He was going to make them regret ever underestimating him. And soon, the Galactic Empire would learn a valuable lesson: no one, no matter how powerful, could take on a Navy SEAL and expect to win. The ship's alarms blared through the halls of the tyrant, but Marcus didn't flinch. He moved swiftly, knowing time was against him. The guards were already scrambling to contain the breach, but they weren't used to dealing with a prisoner who fought back. The corridors of the Empire's flagship were a maze of steel and cold metal, and Marcus was well aware that every second spent here increased his chances of being recaptured. But he didn't plan on getting captured. His eyes darted from corner to corner, searching for an escape route. The military-grade boots of the Empire's elite guards echoed down the hallway as they converged on his location. There was no time to waste. He had to keep moving, keep them off balance. He could hear the footsteps growing closer, several guards, heavily armed, moving fast. But Marcus had been trained to handle situations like this, to survive against overwhelming odds. He ducked into a maintenance shaft, his body barely fitting into the cramped space. It was a tight squeeze, but the heat of battle and the adrenaline coursing through him made it seem like nothing. His hands, now free from the cuffs, were ready for whatever came next. He reached down, feeling the pulse of his equipment, the standard-issue weapons they had given him, along with a few surprises he'd picked up along the way. The hallway above him was silent for a moment, then the heavy thuds of boots on metal again. They were getting closer. He could sense them, their eagerness to capture their elusive prisoner. The thought of him escaping had no place in their minds. They believed themselves to be the rulers of this galaxy. But they didn't know who they were dealing with. Marcus held his breath, waiting for the right moment. He knew the guard patrols on this level would be rotating soon, and he had to time his next move perfectly. As the next round of guards passed, Marcus dropped down silently, landing behind them. The confusion on their faces was instant. They hadn't expected him to be so close. Before the first guard could react, Marcus was on him, his hand covering the alien's mouth, muffling the scream. A quick snap of the neck, and the first guard dropped to the ground, silent as the rest of the team continued their search. Marcus knew he didn't have much time before they'd realize something was wrong. One by one, he moved through the ranks, incapacitating each guard with brutal precision. His training had turned him into a shadow, a whisper in the hallways, slipping past their lines. Every strike, every move, was executed with flawless technique. He didn't waste a single motion, each one calculated, efficient, deadly. Soon, only one guard remained, standing at the end of the hall. This one was different. He wasn't a simple foot soldier. He wore a higher rank and was more experienced, carrying a blaster and a combat knife. The others had been easy, but this one was dangerous. Marcus could tell from the way the guard moved, the way he held himself. But Marcus had faced worse, and he had something the guard didn't: experience. The guard turned, spotting Marcus just as he was about to make his move. "You're a fool, human," the guard spat, raising his weapon. "You're nothing but a prisoner." "Not anymore," Marcus replied coldly. Before the guard could fire, Marcus moved. His body was a blur of motion, his hands locking onto the guard's arm and twisting the blaster from his grip in one fluid motion. The guard fought back, pulling out his knife, but Marcus was already inside his reach. A quick jab to the throat disarmed him, followed by a swift punch to the stomach. The guard gasped for air, his hands clutching at his throat, and before he could react, Marcus knocked him unconscious with a sharp strike to the temple. The last guard crumpled to the floor, and Marcus stood over him, breathing heavily but steady. He was in enemy territory, and every second counted. There was no room for hesitation. He grabbed the blaster from the fallen guard, checking it for ammunition before slinging it across his shoulder. He wasn't just escaping anymore, he was taking the fight to them. Marcus sprinted down the corridor, his mind racing as he calculated his next move. The ship was huge, its corridors endless, and the Empire would be watching every entry and exit. His initial plan was to find the ship's command center, take out the communication systems, and disable the engines, anything to buy time and disrupt their control. The Empire had made a grave mistake by underestimating him. They thought they could just arrest him and parade him around like an ordinary soldier. But Marcus wasn't just an ordinary soldier. He was a Navy SEAL, trained to infiltrate, survive, and eliminate. He had been in worse situations before. He had been pushed to the edge of death and back. And now, the Galactic Empire was going to learn that there was nothing more dangerous than a human who had nothing left to lose. As he rounded the corner, he could hear the telltale hum of blasters charging. It wouldn't be long before the Empire realized he was free and sent in reinforcements. But Marcus was already thinking 5 steps ahead. He wasn't done with them yet. This was just the beginning. The ship's corridors were a labyrinth of cold metal and bright, sterile lights. The tyrant was massive, a fortress in the void, and Marcus knew there was no easy way to escape its grasp. But as he moved deeper into the heart of the ship, he also knew this was the Empire's biggest mistake. They had underestimated him, and now, they were about to face the consequences. Marcus had been trained to think on his feet, to adapt to any situation and turn it to his advantage. His Navy SEAL training had prepared him for everything: extreme environments, impossible odds, and relentless enemies. But this was different. He wasn't just fighting for survival. He was fighting for the freedom of his people, for the world he had sworn to protect. As he moved through the ship, he could hear the hum of the Empire's communication systems overhead. The tyrant's central command center was located deep within the ship, where the highest-ranking officers oversaw every operation. If Marcus could reach it, he could take control of their communications, disable their weapons systems, and buy Earth's remaining forces some time to regroup. But as he moved closer, he realized the level of security was far greater than he had anticipated. The hallways were heavily guarded, and the Empire was beginning to suspect that their prisoner had escaped. He could hear the muffled sound of their voices, the heavy footsteps of armored guards echoing through the narrow corridors. Marcus needed to move faster. He ducked into a ventilation shaft, silently moving through the air ducts. The ship's sensors would be able to detect his movements, but the vents weren't large enough for the standard guards to follow. It was the perfect route. It wasn't long before Marcus found himself directly above the command center. The ship's central hub, with its elaborate control panels and walls covered in alien technology, was just below him. The walls buzzed with activity as the Empire's leaders scrambled to regain control of their vessel, unaware that their prisoner was already within striking distance. He pulled out a small device from his pack, a tool designed to hack into the ship's security systems. Marcus had spent hours studying the ship's layout before his capture, memorizing every detail. Now, it was time to put that knowledge to use. With a few quick keystrokes, the device hummed to life, overriding the ship's security systems. The cameras flickered off. The guards stationed outside the command center no longer had eyes on their surroundings. Marcus moved swiftly, silently, climbing out of the ventilation shaft and sliding down the wall behind the command center. In a swift motion, he incapacitated the 2 guards stationed at the door, moving so fast that neither of them had time to react. The first one went down with a chokehold, the second with a strike to the neck that left him unconscious before he even hit the ground. Marcus didn't hesitate. He needed to be in and out, and he couldn't afford to leave witnesses. He slipped inside the command center. The chaos inside was palpable. High-ranking officers barked orders, trying to make sense of the sudden security breach. Their eyes darted toward the door as Marcus entered, his weapon raised, but they were already too late. The first officer reached for his blaster, but Marcus was already there. A quick jab to the wrist sent the weapon flying out of the officer's hand, and a punch to the gut left him gasping for air, unable to defend himself. The other officers froze in shock. They had expected a prisoner to be weak, a pawn to be controlled. But they hadn't expected a warrior, a man trained to kill without hesitation. "Who the hell are you?" one of the officers gasped, her voice shaking. I'm the one who's about to end this, Marcus replied coldly, his gaze fixed on the ship's central control panel. And I'm going to make sure you regret ever underestimating me. He didn't waste any more time on questions. The ship's communication systems were wide open, and Marcus immediately began working his way into the mainframe. His fingers flew over the controls, bypassing security measures and hacking into the system. Within moments, he had control of the ship's weapons and communication channels. The ship's AI began to register the intrusion, but Marcus was already in control. He activated the ship's internal broadcast system and spoke directly into the microphone, his voice steady and confident. "This is Private Marcus Callahan, United Earth Forces," he said, his words ringing through the ship. "I've just taken control of your flagship. Your fleet is gone. Your forces are retreating. And Earth is no longer under your control." The officers in the room were silent, staring at him in shock. Marcus could see the fear in their eyes now, the fear of the unknown. The fear that they had lost control of everything. "You've made the mistake of thinking Earth was weak," Marcus continued, his voice echoing through the ship's systems. "You thought you could conquer us with your technology, your weapons, your ships. But now you'll learn that the human spirit is something you can't control. You've underestimated humanity. And that's the last mistake you'll make." The lights flickered for a moment as Marcus hacked into the weapons systems, locking the Empire's arsenal of missiles. The ship shuddered as the automated systems were disabled, its weapons now completely under his control. "Tell your Empire," Marcus said, his voice cold as ice, "that this is what happens when they mess with Earth. We fight back." With a final flourish, Marcus disabled the ship's command systems, sealing the fate of the tyrant. The Galactic Empire would now be faced with the reality of their mistake, underestimating a human soldier. Marcus walked out of the command center, leaving behind a group of stunned officers. They were no longer a threat. They were just another lesson in the galaxy's war against humanity, a lesson they would never forget. Marcus stood on the command deck of the Tyrant, now a ghost ship in the void of space. The chaos that had once filled the halls of the ship was now silent. The once proud officers of the Galactic Empire were now prisoners of their own arrogance. With their command center compromised, their fleet scattered, and their weapons disabled, Marcus had stripped them of everything they had once taken for granted. The tables had turned, and the galaxy was about to learn the true cost of underestimating humanity. He could hear the distant sounds of alarms still blaring, but they were growing fainter, more desperate. The officers and crew of the Tyrant knew they were out of time. But it wasn't just the Tyrant that was vulnerable, this was a message, a declaration to the rest of the Empire. The Galactic Empire had underestimated humanity once, and now, Marcus was ensuring they would never forget Earth. "General, we've secured the lower decks," Captain Riker's voice crackled through the comms. "The prisoners are contained, and we've disabled all weapons systems. The fleet is in disarray, but we've lost communications with our allies. We need to make sure the message gets out." Marcus exhaled slowly, steadying his thoughts. "We've already made the impact. Now, we finish it. Get me the comms network." The moment Marcus had taken control of the Tyrant, he had known this would be more than just an escape, it would be a message to every corner of the galaxy. The Galactic Empire's arrogance had blinded them, and now, Marcus would ensure that Earth's name would be written into the stars, not as a footnote in galactic history, but as a force to be reckoned with. As the comms team worked to restore contact with Earth's military network, Marcus paced the command deck. The weight of the situation was finally hitting him, the enormity of what he had accomplished, the risk of facing the entire Empire alone. His pulse was steady, but the gravity of the moment was impossible to ignore. The Empire would retaliate. They would come with reinforcements, and they would fight with everything they had. But humanity had something the Empire never would. The comms officer gave him a nod, and the holodisplay flickered to life, showing Earth's shattered but resilient face. He had done it, he had created a direct link between Earth and the Tyrant, using the ship's remaining systems to broadcast a message to the entire galaxy. "General Hunter, this is Private Marcus Callahan," Marcus said, his voice calm and steady as he stepped into the hollow recording. To the Galactic Empire and any other empire watching this, you thought humanity was weak. You thought you could come here, take what you wanted, and leave us helpless. You thought that a species so young, so fractured, could never stand against your might. The display switched to images of the tyrant, its once formidable warships now powerless and drifting, helpless against the might of humanity's will. Well, you were wrong, Marcus continued, his voice gaining strength. The Xyler, the Carrack, the Zothran, they've all seen what we're capable of. And now, so will you. You've made the mistake of underestimating humanity before, but trust me, you'll never make that mistake again. You wanted to take Earth? You wanted to break us? You'll have to go through me, and every single human left standing. The transmission was sent across every channel, every corner of the Empire's communication network, reaching every officer, every soldier. The message was clear: humanity was no longer weak. They were no longer prey to be hunted. They were a force to be reckoned with. Marcus turned and looked out at the vast expanse of space. The stars beyond were a cold, dark reminder of the galaxy's vastness, and for the first time, Earth wasn't just another insignificant planet in the distance. It was a beacon of strength, a challenge to anyone who dared to threaten it. The tyrant was now under his control, but he knew this was only the beginning. The Empire would retaliate. They would send their fleets, their commanders, their most advanced weapons. But humanity had faced worse. Humanity had fought through the darkest of times and emerged stronger. And now, it was humanity's turn to strike back. Prepare the fleet, Marcus said, his tone hard and unwavering. We're not running. We're going to show the galaxy what happens when you make Earth your enemy. And with that, he turned to face the command center. The war was far from over. The Empire would come for them, but Earth was no longer a target. It was a force in its own right. A force that would no longer be ignored. And Marcus Callahan, the soldier they had underestimated, would lead humanity into the stars.